I Was a Killing Joke, Jodie C. King, 2012. Chapter 2, Who Am I? The year Killing Joke began, I was 9 years old, and although assisted by an unconventional upbringing, already on the road to rebellion, besides listening to the elders' offerings of 70s eclectic heroes, I had not really found a musical taste of my own. Grown out of the Gary Glitter glam child phase, save the jokes, I was head nodder in for the school recorder consort and content to spend my time, when I was not out rescuing wildlife, practicing my chosen arts of music and amateur dramatics. Very early on, Black Sabbath had ground a groove in my mind that was to massively affect my own writing style later in life. With plenty of old scratch albums and singles hanging around the house, there was always something different for me to listen to, and for a while, Black Betty and Jailhouse Rock were my favourites. I could listen to them on repeat to the annoyance of my elder sister, as youngsters do, by lifting and leaving up the arm on the turntable. However, the first ever vinyl I actually owned was a theme tune to TV drama Shoestring, which a wonderful friend of the elders and pleasant influence on my life had bought me for Christmas. He had felt obliged to give me the present early, when I caught him playing it one night whilst hanging around on the stairs, wanting to join in with the merriment of adults when I should have been tucked up in bed. What a thrilled young girl I was to have a brand new 45 single in a full photo-covered case of Eddie Shoestring all to myself. By the age of 11, I had fallen in love with Adam and the Ants, though I had also, influenced greatly by my elder sister, learned how to mime to almost every song by David Bowie. I adored Bowie, but the Ants had been the first band to really catch my full attention and stir up my guts. It was something in the slightly wild vocal tone of Stuart Goddard, alongside tribally tasteful drums, that awakened a willful part of my own makeup. Maybe it matched the same spark which had been aroused in my very early days of this time human existence by the Glitter Band. I have never had the opportunity to ask Adam the Ant if he was influenced by Killing Joke, or Killing Joke if they were influenced at all by the Glitter Band, but I guess there was a large chance that either could have been. As quickly as the flame had been ignited, Prince Charming and his decision to morph into a Nancy boy and give up his kingdom of the wild frontier finished the love affair with Adam and me. The more aggressive sounds of the jam going underground seemed more worthy of a listen as the earth moved clumsily into the 80s, and a flock of seagulls far more experimentally fun. I gave up trying to start my own girl group, following a stroppy fallout with my little Indian friend who insisted she sang lead even though she was tone deaf, forcing me to struggle with her brand new Casio keyboard. I am convinced, had he discovered her, Pete Waterman would have made $1 million out of that girl, although perhaps it will early to expect skinheads to appreciate Bhangra pop. In 1981, I formed deep relations with reggae and dub, almost certainly due to the fact that I had started at a secondary school which was at the time commendably multiracial, although predominantly black. My musical taste became widely varied. I was a punk, mod, angry kid wearing rasta beads and basketball boots, who impressively, by my own standards, went on to win a chatting contest at an age when Marshall Mathers would have still been playing with his Action Men. Is he still rapping now he is 30-odd, eating his words after the Moby jibes? Back in the day, speaking in rhyme and rhythm held the name of toasting, and the prize, 2 pieces of burnt toast wrapped in a chocolate box with a £5 record token. An old friend of mine, who at the time worked as a hitman, easily because he was 6'7" and psychotically wired, with big old stinky dreadlocks and eyes hazed from years of hardship and hash, had entered the same contest. Consequently, In deep disgust at my success, he picked me up by my red, gold, green and black beads that I wore around my neck and tried to strangle me to death. "No little white gal beats me at toasting," he spat, pulling my deathly pale, honky white face frighteningly close to his huge blistered lips. I guess he was either hungry or saw me as a friend indeed, and considered he could have swapped the token for a £5 wrap of weed, or herb, as it was lovingly named by the Rasta folk. He may have succeeded in ending my life there and then, had he not dropped me back down to earth when our youth club leader, now a well-known Labour politician for Manchester, Richard Leese, had given him a quick, sharp prod after realising I was gasping for breath and had started to turn blue. It was a year or so later when I saw that man get his comeuppance. Hanging out on a wall with friends as we did in those days, I noticed him wobbling out of a chip shop with a large parcel of food. The pain of the strangling flashed through my mind as I felt slightly shaken with fear that he might catch sight of me in his drunken state and come and repeat the assault. However, as I watched, he tripped up and, trying to keep his supper safe, failed to put his hands out and fell flat on his face. He must have really hurt himself, and the food splattered all over the road anyway. But although I couldn't help feeling sorry for the guy, I do remember the word "ha" came to mind. I became somewhat fearless rather quickly attending that high school, and spent a lot of the evenings as a nearly teenager hanging out at shebeens and smoking dens in Cheetham Hill, Hume and Moss Side. These are places that could have been pretty dangerous for a little white chick alone back then, especially such a small and naive one, but I adored the music, the excitement of their community's difference, and I felt and fitted like part of the scene. A completely mixed up kid. My hair at 13 was spiky topped, shaven sides, with dreadlocks and beads at the neckline. Although, believe it or not, I didn't pinch the look from Boy George. Mikey Dread and Yellow Man were more my style, with their explicitly daring and frequently hilarious lyrics. But I still kept my feet dipped in all waters, ensuring myself the future of a musical polymath. Reggae remained in my heart, kept alive in later times by Ed and his fabulous assortment of dub and stress-busting dope tune artists, including the prodigious Augustus Pablo and excessively lovable Lee Scratch Perry. However, following my first and relatively short-lived immersion into the spirit of Jah, in which I lived with unfathomed surety as I am a Rasta, I entangled myself with an alternative crew of youngsters who hung out with my elder sister because they were all adept at the David Bowie miming. They also got up to nonsensical activities which appealed to my very giddy nature. I became proficient at blagging my way into nightclubs which held an age limit of 21 by backcombing my hair, piling on way too much makeup and pretending like I could walk in ridiculously high-heeled shoes. To get on the bus to the nightclub for a child fair, I would simply stop trying to walk upright in the heels and tell the driver, in the terrible rough Manchester accent I was blessed with, my real age of 13. We managed to have many a long and fun night out on £5 and still have taxi fare home. I would spend most of the night in the back cave of Thursday's nightclub, the former Pips, in the middle of a quiet dance floor, miming to songs I could barely make sense of. Bowie's intricate weaving of weird and wonderful words gave my inquisitive mind something to meddle with and allowed me the freedom of expression I so desperately craved. It was in Thursdays that we tried and tested just about everything there was to snort or sniff, with the exception of Evo Stick. For some reason it was pretty cool to get high on chemicals, but glue was about as hip then as heroin is now, and we steered clear. My sister's boyfriend was a science technician at the time, and we were lucky, or unlucky enough, I say in hindsight, to be his ever-keen lab rats. I imagine the elders would have been horrified to know what we were up to in those chloroform-clouded days. But we lived to tell the tale, of which I am sure they are encouraged, albeit with 1 trillion less brain cells than we were born with. I kick myself for the stupid choices I made that prevented me becoming anything more than a creative nuisance. Knowing those lost cells could have easily taken me into microsurgery, veterinary work or quantum physics, all of which interest me greatly. It's not in the slightest bit big or clever, and we are all very lucky to have survived it. Consequently, having spent half my life getting out of my head, I had to spend the rest of it trying to get back in again. Having said that, everything happens for a reason for our highest good, on the path to enlightenment, and what I had learned from being stupid then, I use for the good of all, and the good of all only, now. I had actually failed to notice my initial exposure to Killing Joke on meeting Eddie in Great Yarmouth at the first of many scooter runs I attended, during another short-lived phase I went through. Again, everything for a reason, and had I not gone through that fun and character-strengthening phase, I would not have met Ed at that time. Not attending school so much in the last few years meant it mattered not that my mod girl pals and I would spend most of the weekend depriving ourselves of sleep, dancing to Northern Soul and various ska beats at seaside town all-nighters. A short-term friend of mine had managed to arrange us both a pillions ride to Yarmouth with a couple of clean-cut young men she hardly knew, and I gladly jumped at the opportunity to grab a bit of excitement away from home. I was driven on a snazzy dark blue P200E Vespa by a quiet and grumpy young gentleman whose name I have never recalled. It was an epic journey, hard going on the back of a Vespa, and on arrival we realised that maybe we should have taken a little more than a sleeping bag. My fellow friend, with a flat top, had travelled down on the back of an equally forgettable young man's Vespa, and once there we were on our own and tent-less till Sunday afternoon. The camping area was arranged around a racetrack, and without a tent, nor in with the in crowd, the stone steps of the audience enclosure were the only sheltered place to sleep. But as many people had the same idea, I thought the mass would keep us warm. I was quite wrong, and the first night I did not sleep much at all. That was partly because it was just too cold, even with 3 layers of clothing under a flying jacket, but also because a random guy, also with a flat top and a pale blue tattoo on his face, was pestering me to meet his Roger. I was so naive and in the first instance quite chatty and accommodating, for a brief moment apprehensively waiting for his brother to turn up. Then, of course, once I realised what he meant, I was literally frozen with fear. I clutched onto my sleeping bag, closed my eyes tight, and faked at being asleep till he went away. Ed was sitting in the front passenger seat of a little white Ford van the first time I laid eyes on him. My friend had asked if we could get in the vehicle for a while to keep warm, as she knew some of the guys he was with from Crumpsall and Broughton scooter clubs. Eddie's face was red and angry, and he was faffing around with the van's music system trying to get his tape to play. Later, I learned that tape was a copy of Killing Joke Live from 1982 at Manchester Polytechnic. It was the first recording Ed had made of Killing Joke during their Birds of a Feather tour, which he still proudly owns, along with other original recordings he made at Fagin's and the Hacienda in Manchester from the same year. Ed was himself a clever master of sneaking things into places, having managed to get his old-fashioned dictaphone past security by wrapping it up as a birthday present and putting it in his girlfriend's bag. The clubs were incredibly strict about keeping recording devices out of live performances in those days, and the idea was ingenious. Unbeknownst to me then, Killing Joke and sneaking past security were going to become a pretty significant part of my future life. "Get them slags out the van," scowled Eddie, gesturing our way. I felt quite hurt and a little shocked at the rudeness of this angry-faced skinhead. His ginger hair only slightly apparent due to the neat number 1 shave. But I also felt something else, something familiar, and for some reason I wanted to know more of him. Back in North Manchester, I was able to catch up with him again by hanging around with the right people. When I did manage to get him alone, I bravely asked for his phone number. He seemed pleasantly surprised by the attention and was a far different Ed than I had seen in Yarmouth. His true side was to come out when I finally summoned the guts to call him. A young man answered the phone. Eddie? Yeah, I'll just go and get him for you. Hold on. Eddie is an only child, and that was my first small taste of his incredible and limitless sense of humour. He is indeed the ultimate joker, and to this day the funniest man I have ever met. And it's apt and fantastic that he has been a secret underground, voluntary promoter who surely deserves the title of induna of a band called Killing Joke. In fact, it seems almost every Killing Joke fan from the north were introduced to the band in some way, shape or form, or else network origin by the Joke Master himself. And I guess they could put a huge number of their record sales and fan base down to Ed's obsessive belief in and preferment of their splendour. The first time Ed came round to our place, besides playing many practical jokes on the mother and putting sellotape on the cat's feet, he insisted that I listened to his Killing Joke tapes. I'd seen the graffiti, Eddie, Killing Joke, scrawled on the walls of a nearby railway bridge, as well as in the ley line touching historical sanctuary that is Crumpsall Park. Ed had been the local punk naughty nuisance and every good Christian's nightmare. As he can be seen in the photo, a few years before I met him, he had sported a neat bleached Mohican, zipped bondage pants and studded leather jacket, decorated with names of various punk bands, as well as his firm favourite. The scooter phase had seen him smartly dressed in pale jeans and tiny check shirts, ever perfectly polished Doc Martens shoes and expensive flying jackets. But there was still a punk in Eddie, and it was that in him which I found so appealing. As time went on, I was to adopt most of his old wardrobe for myself. I liked to be different and to embody the word change, yet clearly also enjoyed the feeling of belonging to a tribe, floating along in my own personalised version of whatever style grabbed my attention at any given time. On first hearing Killing Joke, the album, I felt physically sick and could barely stand to have it on. Ed assured me the feelings would pass and I should try it a few more times. Like any new and exciting drug causing nausea with the first few hits, Killing Joke, once you are hooked, are astoundingly addictive. It is unlikely you will meet a person whom, having been allured by their uncommon sound and kept on listening, would go on to give up the habit. As powerful and adored by fans at the live shows as it is, I still find some of the first album to be less fascinating and pleasing on the ear than a lot of their later stuff, but it still has a unique feel that will always be a cut above the rest. Dark and heavy with gravelly vocals, Killing Joke prophetically assures of Coleman's desire to make a mark on not only the world of music but the world itself in a way that nobody has done before or I doubt will do again. Their second album, What's This For?, is much easier listening, with a noticeably lighter feel to it than their first. Still, outing discontent and nonchalant magnanimity, with dogs barking and jazz wooing and warring in areas, this is happy, dark music that somehow never sounds dated, unless you listen to the old crackly vinyl version that I own. The album cover is far more interesting, especially for the teenage tripping hipsters we became, and I was only disappointed that I never got to see Killing Joke live in the earlier days. By the time I had made it to the shows, Jazz had developed a much calmer and mature stance on stage and was sporting a Kevin Keegan hairdo and a Men at Work style black leather jacket. I had missed the raw and egoless outbursts of his youth, but despite the attire, the fervour was still there to hold my attention, and I rolled with the altering states of each album, eating them up like an ant on a sugar fest. By previous arrangement and given permission, I am including some of the daring Mark Prindle's reviews of Killing Joke albums, as they are often quite accurate, extremely informative to the KJ Virgin, and as you will see for yourself at times, wittily entertaining. Whatever you may think of this critique, he's open enough to listen. He has guts strong enough to blurt about what he hears, and most of the time his opinions I find are honest and precise evaluations. The first time I saw a picture of Jazz on Ed's wall, with his huge bird-like beak for a nose, his heavy eyebrows and jester's grin, there was a second strange and powerful stirring in my guts. I felt as though I knew him, his face all too strangely familiar to me. He had astoundingly similar features to a guy I had dated a couple of years before I met Ed, who had taught me to drive at the meagre age of 13, in a green Morris Marina we named Orville. He was a regular at Thursdays, our weekend handout, and I had messed his head up one night by encouraging him to sniff way too much poppers before watching him pull a white one and walking off and leaving him to cope with it alone. I'm sure I paid the karmic debt for that one a few times, but in the moment my female friends and I found it hysterical. Like Jazz, he also had the jester-style turned-up mouth, although he was very fair in comparison. The mother insisted I had a thing about big noses and heavy eyebrows because my blood father had been a Jew, with both, and that somehow I was missing the man I never knew. I suppose it could be true, as Ed had a big nose too. Early video recordings show Jazz, a devilishly handsome young man, skinny and dripping with sweat, eyes ablaze and nostrils flared, freaking out on the dynamism of the music. Bouncing around, evoking some invisible entity with one hand whilst playing the keyboards with the other. He looks possessed by some ultra-appealing primal force, the same power that rapidly drew me into the centre of the tornado that is Killing Joke. That ultimate body-shaking, frenzied state is easy to accomplish if you let go of the ego defence and allow your body to absorb and then let out the tremendous energy of the created noise. As a neophyte, this was a shortcut to my own transmutation. So much more than just a sound, way beyond just a feeling, and I had never experienced a person capable of expressing that state in such an open and natural way as he. It was as though my own personal demons were released within that ball of fire I could see around Coleman. Watching him in that state was like I was watching another part of me, or how I was meant to be, brave, wild, strong and free. In the same video, youth wearing a fireman's helmet, baby-faced and charismatic, with a shade of Sid Vicious about him, is cool and appealing nevertheless, whilst a young Geordie, who could be mistaken for looking iced up with fear, may have actually been secretly browsing the audience for his future wife. In this recording, Big Paul, I have to say, looks almost the same as he does these days, collected and kind, steadily concentrating on his humbly accurate playing style. That man has certainly preserved himself well. Paul is a cat lover, and he and his wife have 4 of them, which they treat like babies, and whom I imagine have their own nanny whilst the band are out touring these days. One of the first things I read in the press that caught my heart concerning Killing Joke was the mention of a black dog in the rehearsal room wagging its tail along with the beat of the drums. I had a black dog at the time who came to every rehearsal I ever did, faithfully remaining by my side, despite that meaning he had to sit deafeningly close to the drum kit amps or PA system. I have to fight with the editor when writing about animals, as they are souls just as humans are, with as much significance in life, and actually oftentimes possess a greater developed sense of faith, respect, and responsibility than a lot of our species. So therefore, to me, they are whom and him, not which and it. For the purposes of the audio, I will just include short excerpts of the reviews by Mark Prindle. Fire Dances, e.g., 1983. Quote, following a restful vacation in beautiful Iceville, Killing Joke returned to the studio with new bassist Paul Raven. Not that you can hear what he's playing anyway, but that's hardly the issue, God damn it to hell. And recorded a record that, pretty much sounds exactly the same as the one before it. The guitar is still quivery, high-pitched and reverby. The vocals are still hoarse and semi-sung, and the drums are still doing tribal industrial sort of thingies. What makes this album a wee bit stronger than those before it, and most of those after it too, is the strong melodic sense that they display throughout the record. Whether you're talking about the jolly bounce around of The Gathering, or the mid-punch of Frenzy, and or its rejuvenating neighbour to the north, the psycho vibes just keep a crunching through and through. Much more idiosyncratic than Killing Joke, much more succinct than What's This For, and much more energetic than Revelations. It's absolutely mind-boggling that not a single one of these tunes would end up on the best of package. But what are you going to do? Pick it up and dance? Or sock your girlfriend in the cheek? No, don't perform the latter activity. Before long, Ed and I progressed from dope to magic mushrooms to augment our laughter, epochs and listening experience. Nothing could compare to the inspiration provided by walking through the park in the dark whilst listening to Killing Joke's musical madness on headphones in a heightened state of awareness. The underlying tunes created by guitar harmonics and keys mixing chaotically together amidst a sea of steadily uniform bass and drum rumblings from heaven or hell I could not tell. But this was music to march to, and I wanted to do a war dance. On and off over the next 7 years, and apart from several short-lived violent splits, I spent more time with Ed than I had with any other friend or relative besides the black dog. Oh, and the brown dog, and the uncountable amount of other animals. It was a 24/7 type of affair, and Killing Joke music was the child we doted on. I was at home in a new world, rapidly evolving to higher states of consciousness, sparked by the words of a genius come madman as he intoxicated the air amidst an intricate web of sound. Music is a colossally powerful phenomenon. Even the simple beating of a solo drum can evoke considerable changes in the receptors of the brain. It can awaken new thought, which can bring about emotional and even physical change. Inspired by musical virtuosity in our midst, Ed and I formed a comedy band along with Colin, a good friend of ours, on guitar. To the horror of the elders, I swapped my tenor saxophone for a cheap and nasty drum kit, following a couple of lessons from an ex-drummer of Dumpy's Rusty Nuts. And we proceeded to make an awful lot of noise in the spare room at home. Ed wrote some amazingly catchy songs at the time, with titles like Violent Chip Shop Song, The Pope Sucks Cocks in the Vatican, and all had the same 4-bar tune, but with varying tempos so we could tell each song apart. Aside from the silly band, we had more serious work to contend to. It was now 1985. Jazz had big curly hair, and Killing Joke were touring with their 5th album, Nighttime. Regular mushroom drops ensured we knew the music a depth more than inside out by the time we got to see them perform it live. We had found our spaceship to other worlds, and nothing would stop us from cruising in it. Here the photo shows my bedroom at age 15, with copied artwork from New Day by Killing Joke.